All right, let's get moving. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Tableau Prep user group session for December of 2022. This is our last one for the year, and I am thrilled to be able to help us cap off the year with some fantastic insights and some great speakers today. So by way of introduction, my name is Beth Kairys. I'm one of the Tableau Prep user group leaders. I'm based out of Melbourne in Australia, and I'm an analytics consultant for Interworks. With me today, we also have Jack Parry, who's another one of our leaders. He is a solution consulting lead at the Data School. And then we have some fantastic speakers. So we have Ervin, who's a freelance developer, and Kyle, who's a senior manager from Ancestry. And I'll give a little bit more on them in a minute. So the Tableau Prep user group. These are the guys that you'll see around from time to time. Myself and Jack are up there, but as are our lovely colleagues, Jenny and Jared. So if you want to find out more around what the Tableau Prep user group does, or these ways you want to get involved, please feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. More than happy to have a bit of a chat about what this is and how you can help. And in that vein, we recently launched the Tableau Prep Playground. So this is a Slack workspace where you can connect with like-minded prep users and get advice. It's actually been really, really popular. I'm always a little unsure how things are going to go when people have to explain when they're stuck on something, but that's something I really love about Tableau, is that everybody's always willing to lend a hand and help people get unstuck and moving again. So please come along and join us. And you can do so at the link that you see on your screen. And I'll pop that into the chat as well when our speakers are presenting. And then finally, if you're interested in presenting, please reach out on this simple form. Now, one of the big questions I always get from people is, what do I have to say? What do I have to contribute? And the answer is heaps. Your individual experience, your individual work. Now, you don't need to be a Tableau guru to come along and present. Some of our most popular sessions are from people who have experience working in real world situations and can lend us some knowledge about how other people might work in that space as well. So please don't be shy. If you think you might have something to say, please do reach out and we'll have a chat about how we can get you involved. And so for our speakers today, we have Ervin, who's a freelance Tableau developer. And he's based out of Manila, so it's very early in the morning for him. So thank you, Ervin, for joining us at, I think, what is about 8 a.m. your time. So thank you, and what a great way to kick off your morning. So then we also have Kyle. So Kyle is a senior manager with Ancestry, and he's based out of Washington State, which I think, if I'm not wrong, is a more reasonable time of the day, although definitely heading into the evening. So thank you, Kyle, for joining us at the other end of your day. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Ervin to kick us off. And I'm really excited by what Ervin has to bring today. So Ervin, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Beth. Let me share my screen to start. Are you seeing my screen now? Is it good? Okay.
Yes, we are. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm Ervin Vinzon. As Beth mentioned, I'm here today to share you why do you need to learn Tableau Prep. So again, I'm Ervin Vinzon. I work as a freelance Tableau developer for about 2 years now, thanks to Tableau Public Hire Me button, as it helped me start my career in freelancing. I'm also a Tableau Public Ambassador and the leader of Manila Tableau User Group. I am passionate on developing skills through practice. That's why I actively join Tableau community projects. And I own 2 dogs named Sora and Sevi. Unfortunately, they're not here because they're playing outside. Okay, so as an introduction, I wanted to learn Tableau Prep because in my day-to-day job, I encounter data that is not ready for analysis and visualization. Cleaning the data on Tableau desktop can be done, but using Tableau Prep makes it faster and easier. So in order to learn the tool and be good at it, I challenged myself to solve 100 Preppin data challenges. So to those who don't know what is Preppin data is a weekly challenge to give examples to Tableau Prep users and test their data prep skills. So I started answering my Preppin data challenges last June 29. So finally, after 161 days, I managed to answer 100 data prep challenges. So far, I can say that I really learned how to use Tableau Prep by answering the challenges, following instructions in the example, and watching videos provided by Tableau and DataFam community. So I'm about to share some of the skills I pick up throughout my journey. So here are some of those. Connecting to data. Tableau Prep allows you to connect to 7 different types of files and 57 different kinds of servers. So for a file, it allows you to connect to an Access, Excel, PDF file, spatial files, physical file, Tableau extract and text file. Then for some servers, here are some of these screenshots. Not all these servers were included in the screenshot. So if you want to learn more, please visit this link or I will share this link onto the chat itself. Then next is input data. There are three kinds of input data in Tableau Prep. Let me share my screen to sample this. So first, this simple input. So as mentioned in the slide, it says that you will simply drag and drop of tables in the workflow. So I have this data set wherein I've recorded each challenge I've solved. So as mentioned in the slide, I simply drag and drop the data set, then I can connect to the data. Then next is multiple input. Multiple input allows the union of multiple tables within the same structure. Using data interpreter, sorry, allows the union of multiple tables within the same structure. So if you have a data set which have the same structure, for example, I have this data set wherein I've recorded the challenges I've answered for each month. So have July, August, and September, and I wanted to connect to data or input this data set onto Tableau server. Then we just go to Tableau Prep, then drag and drop that, then select any month you want to choose, then drag into the workspace, select the data set, then select tables, then select union multiple tables. From here, you may select apply. Since these are the same structures, it will automatically union. So if I were to select apply and then add the clean step, it will view all the months within this step. So that was the multiple input step. Then for using, there's a function here, the same as Tableau Desktop, wherein you may use a data interpreter. So to those who don't know data interpreter, it allows you to the user to input the data in the file, even the data is in the right format. So for example, I have this data set wherein again we're just drag and dropping this data, and it says here that there's an F2, meaning the data is unstructured or not in the right format. So if we were to select a data interpreter, again, and then add the clean step, it will automatically adjust based on what is needed on the slide or what prep would think it's best in the right format. So that would be all for the input data. Then next is cleaning data. There are many ways of cleaning data in Tableau Prep, which is all done in a clean step. Here are some of the examples. Again, we're going to uh, in Tableau Prep. Just pull it out. Okay. So as mentioned in this slide, there are many ways of cleaning data in Tableau Prep. You may split data, group values, convert data types, remove letters, numbers, and punctuations, convert dates, rename fields, and filter data. Let me have some examples of those. So for splitting example, Tableau Prep allows you to split um, custom or automatically. So for example, I have this column wherein I wanted to split the link. So if I were to select these three dots here and then choose split, uh, the one I mentioned earlier wherein Tableau Prep allows you to automatic split or custom split. So for automatic split, Tableau Prep will automatically split the data set as it or the column as it needs to. Then for a um, as you can see, this is the outcome of those split. It split it into 5 columns. Then if I were to choose a custom split, for example, I've recorded in this row wherein I have all those steps I've used in order to answer the challenge. I wanted, since I'm seeing that this is separated by columns or by commas, then I can just simply custom split. And then I wanted to separate it one by one, then I can just add a comma here, then select all, then split. So that is just some um, simple examples of splitting data in Tableau Prep. So again, so don't be worried if you have mistaken some split. You can just all the changes were recorded in the changes pane. So for as an example of a group exam of grouping in Tableau Prep, um, I have this column here wherein I misspelled some of the or aggregate value. So a good use case here is that when you think that the rows are have the same meaning or the same data, since I just misspelled this, you can just select again three dots and then group values and then choose whatever it may be based on your use case. So for this, since I think that the best use case is to choose pronunciation, if I select this one, then Prep will automatically group all those misspelled aggregate values. Then next is convert example. Converting is also very simple in Tableau Prep. So I have again this clean step here. Wherein since ID we're not we are not computing an ID since that is just an index for a row. So we don't need to have it as a number or whole number. So we can just simply add this or change it as a string value. Then um, that is how very simple you add or change the data or the data type of a column within Tableau Prep. Again, this there are many other data types you are allowed to convert on to a column. So you may just look at it based on your use case. Then next is for filter examples. Filter is also very simple in Tableau Prep. So again, uh, since if I wanted to remove all those null values, I in this column name, which is the start or the start time where I recorded the challenge, I can just simply select again these three dots here, then filter, and then choose all of the filter or the values based on my what I needed. So if I wanted to see only the null values, then or the non-null values, then I will simply select that and then select none. Done. There you go. I removed all the null values within the data set itself. There are other ways for you to remove other values. If I were to use it as a detail, again, then, so for example, there's a null here, and then just select on the row itself, then right click, then exclude value. That is another way of filtering values in Tableau Prep. Then next, remove letters, numbers, or case cleaning examples. For example, I have this column wherein I have the names of the challenge for I've solved. If I wanted to remove or make it uppercase, lowercase, then again, you just simply select those three dots in the column name, then choose what or based on your use case. So based on my use case, I wanted to be it an uppercase, then I will just select that. Then again, all the changes were recorded in the changes pane and the change was done. And the challenge name were all in uppercase. So what if I wanted to remove the letters or numbers within this column? So again, this can be also be done in Tableau Prep by choosing or selecting remove letters, numbers, and punctuations. All those functions were easily be seen in Tableau Prep. So that would be all for samples for input or for cleaning data. Then moving on, um, calculating data. There are also many ways of calculating data in Tableau Prep. This is mostly done on a clean step, and here are some of the examples. So how do we calculate data in Tableau Prep? Um, Again, I have this data set here, and um, if I were to create a or calculate data, you can just look for this in this menu bar and then select create calculated field. Then as a reference, there's a reference here wherein you may choose a any value of what kind of calculation you will use. Uh, you may use an aggregate, analytic, date, logical, number, string, and type conversion. For a string calculation, which is I've mentioned in this slide, for example, I very easy use case is that I have this data set wherein, or I have this column names where I have the first name and the last name of each challenger or each challenger for the challenge. So if I wanted to um, concatenate those, I can just create calculated field, then select those column names, then add this calculation since this will concatenate those two. So if I were to apply and then save, um, I have also learned another trick where you can overwrite a certain column with if you make a calculation. So for example, I wanted to add a comma here since in this challenge one, in this column called in this field calculation one, if I wanted to make it or to overwrite that calculation, and add a comma within each name. That is just how you simply do it. Um, you just use the same name, and then it will overwrite the calculation. Again, as you can see, the outcome will be this. Since I've overwrite the calculation. So next is date calculation. Date calculations can also be done in prep. Um, so if again, we can go back into creating a calculated field. So as an example, since I've recorded um, the time and the date of each challenge I solved, but I wanted to make it as a date time field. So um, I made this calculation and choose date time, then combine it to make time to combine it as a date time field. So voila, this is now a date time data type wherein the challenge start and the challenge end of each challenge I solve. So again, this is how very simple you can make a date calculation on Tableau Prep. So what if there's also a rank calculation and LOD calculation in Tableau Prep? Um, I wanted to know the rank of what is the fastest challenge I've solved. So if I were to rank that, then I have this data, or I have this column or challenge minutes. And how did I do this rank? We can just recreate it by selecting those three dots, create calculated field, then rank. Again, there will be another view for a ranking in Tableau Prep. This will be the partition or the grouping for each rank that you will make. So since I don't want to partition anything, and this will be the kind of rank I will use. Tableau Prep allows you to rank by dense, percentile, and rank. And this will be the field that I am ranking. Then this will be the sort. And I wanted to know the fastest minutes I've solved the challenge. Then this will be the name of the field. So from there, I successfully ranked each challenge by simply making that rank calculation. Then for an LOD calculation, a simple example is that let me recreate this one. So I wanted to know the number of minutes I've used to answer the challenge of each challenger. So how will I do that? So then I think about there's an LOD. So this is done by using, since I have this challenge minutes, then create calculated field, then fix LOD. Reminder that Tableau Prep only allows an LOD for now, or allows you to only create an LOD or level or a fixed LOD in Prep. So I wanted to group by each challenger, then total the minutes of each challenger. Then from there, I was able to compute the minutes I've used by to answer the challenge of each challenger. Reminder that this group by will be the dimension for the fixed LOD. Then this will be the aggregation for that LOD. And then from there, I was able to have this calculation, as I mentioned earlier, the challenge minute per challenger. So that would be all for calculating data. Then next, there are also two ways of combining data in Tableau Prep. This is by using a join step or a union step. A join step is if you want to combine data horizontally, you can do it by left, right, inner, or outer join. Then for union step, you may, if you wanted to combine the data vertically. A tip, only 10 steps are allowed in one union step. So let's head again to Tableau Prep to have some examples. So again, I have this data set here wherein the I've recorded the challenges I made. But the problem is I forgot to record some of the challenges, or I forgot to record the time I took some of the challenges. But since it has the same structure wherein I have the date and the number of challenges I made together with this data, or with this within this data set. So these were the unrecorded minutes, or these were only the dates and the number of challenges I made. And since it has the same structure and I wanted to combine it vertically, then I will add a union step. So that is by um, selecting those plus and then add a union. Then from the union step, you may see that if the column names were the same, it will automatically union. So what if the column names were not the same? You may use the merge field in order for it to combine. So from there, so here's an example. Since these are um, this has the same value, or this has the same meaning, and I wanted to merge it as an example, then you just select those two fields and then right click merge fields. From there, it will automatically combine since it has the same structure, the same meaning. So that is just a simple example of unioning data in Tableau Prep. So again, I have this problem wherein I wanted to know the challenger for each challenge. And I have this data set here. I have the IDs, the month, and the number of challenges I made. And again, I have this data set here for the challenger for each, or I have the ID and the challenger. And I wanted to add the challenger, and so I will choose a horizontal combination. So I will use a join step. Again, for adding a join step, you just select those plus and then join. And then for joining, these are the settings. You may choose the ID, or what kind of field you wanted to connect. And then for join type, you may choose either left. You may change what kind of join type here by selecting circles here, or adjusting the circles here. And I wanted to use an inner join. And then there's the summary of join results. From here, can easily see the outcome of that join. And then if I were to join that, now I have this data set here where I have the number of, or where I add the challenger for each challenge. So that would be all for combining data in Tableau Prep. So aggregate data. Aggregating data is also very easy in Tableau Prep. That is by simply dragging a field into either group fields or aggregated fields. So group fields group the data, and aggregate fields aggregate the data from the name itself. So let's head again to Tableau Prep to see some examples. So again, I have this data set here, and the problem is I wanted to know the number of challenges I made for each date. So luckily, there's a aggregate step in Tableau Prep. So for just select plus button and then select the aggregate and then select what will I group and aggregate. Since I wanted to know the number of challenges I made for each day, I will group the date and then I can count the IDs or count distinct the IDs so that I can now know number of challenges I made for each date. So that is how very simple you can aggregate values in Tableau Prep. Um, aside from um, counting distinct, you may also use other aggregation like this. So that would be all for aggregate step. The next is pivot data. There are two ways of pivoting data in Tableau Prep. This is by columns to rows or rows to columns. Column to rows has an option of wildcard search, which is very valuable when you have lot of column names that has a pattern. Example, multiple split names. Then for rows to columns, it requires fields that will pivot rows to columns and fields to aggregate for new columns. So let's head again here to prep. So again, as mentioned in the slide, um, columns to rows is best used if you have multiple split names. So as I mentioned earlier, where I have the split example, I wanted to know. So I have this data set here, and I wanted to split the things I learned field because I wanted it to be in a separate column. So again, um, I added the clean step and choose a split onto things I learned, column name, and then I've used a pivot step, and then I've used the wildcard search. Since it has the same structure, it all has a hyphen within its column name, it automatically or because of the wildcard search, I can easily move or drag those fields that I want to pivot. Then from there, I can see the results of that pivot. Um, then I've used the group values since based on the outcome, I may have misspelled some of the fields. So as an example of pivot to rows or rows to columns pivot, um, I I wonder what steps I've used for each challenge. So I again in doing a rows to columns pivot, you may need to select a field, then choose a field to aggregate for the new columns. Then from here, I choose all the steps I made, then count distinct all the numbers or the IDs. Since I count distinct that, I was able to see, based on the result, I was able to see the number of or the steps I've used for each challenge. So that would be all for pivoting data examples. So lastly, um, after all of those cleaning data, restructuring data wrangling, we need to publish the data or output the data. So outputting data is also very simple in Tableau Prep. There are three ways of outputting data. This is by file, publish data source, or database table. So file has three output types: a Tableau data extract, Microsoft Excel, and a CSV file. Then for publish data source, it requires you to sign in with Tableau Cloud or Tableau server. And for database table, it requires you to connect to a server. Then for, as an example, uh, since I have here these aggregated values which I wanted to output the number of challenges I made for each day. Then I add a output step that is by simply selecting this plus sign again, then add an output. Then from here, you may just adjust the name, what you want. By the way, before that, you may choose a file, publish data source, database, and CRM. Totally missed that one in this slide. You may adjust the location, a tableau, the output type, as I have mentioned, and then these right options for an Excel files. To output the file, you just simply select this play button. And since I don't have any Tableau Cloud or Tableau server signed in, I cannot show you some of those. So, so key takeaways. There are many good reasons to learn Tableau Prep, as discussed in the slides. Connecting input, clean, calculate, combine, aggregate, pivot, and output data is easier and faster done using Tableau Prep. So for learning resources, how I learned some of these things, I go to Preppin data, how to post. I've watched videos from YouTube for how to in Tableau Prep in 5 minutes. I've subscribed for Jared Flores and Tableau Team's YouTube channel, which is treasure trove of learning Tableau Prep materials. And if you wanted to do the same like me, you just solve prep and data challenges. So that would be all. Thank you for your attention and advance happy holidays.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ervin, for all of that. I am so inspired by the number of challenges you completed. What an absolutely mammoth effort and an amazingly fantastic way to learn. And I saw in your challenge minutes example that you answered some of them in something like 6 or 8 minutes. So amazing, well done on that front as well. A big thank you for sharing your learning with us. I think there's a hell of a lot of experience that's gone into that. So thank you.
I hope I convince everyone to learn Tableau Prep now.
Very inspirational. Look at all of the amazing things that you can do. And just on that front, I mean, for me personally, and the reason I got involved with this user group is I think Prep is just a fantastic tool, whether you're end user preparing your own data or you're preparing clean data, clean performant data for other users and needing to do things like push LODs out of Tableau Desktop, for example, or you're developing an approach to cleaning that's then given to the data team for implementation at scale. There are so many ways that you can get involved. There was a ton in Ervin's session, so thank you again. A reminder for everyone that these sessions are recorded, so you'll have all of this available on the Tableau YouTube after today's session. This is great if you, like me, want to come back to some of those things you might not have touched on before. I have never looked at pivoting columns to rows with wildcards, and now I want to have a little bit of a play with that one. If you've got questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, complaints, any of that, please pop them into the chat. We've had some things flying in, so thank you to those who've added things so far, and please keep that coming. Thank you again to Ervin. Thank you. I am going to take back the screen momentarily, and I'll introduce the next guru for today. So I'll be passing over to Kyle. So Kyle is the Senior Manager of Product Analytics at Ancestry, and I'm sure he's also going to wow us with some fantastic things to get us inspired before the end of the year. So thank you, Kyle. I'll pass to you.
No pressure at all. Thanks.
Following that one, yep. Thank you.
I will double down on the resources that Ervin shared there at the end. All great ways to kind of be exposed to various things that you can do in prep. So I'm going to talk a little bit today around how I've Sorry, of course, right as I start, Zoom decided to restart me. So
that's always the way, right?
Everybody left. What happened? All right,
oh, good. We're all still here. Perfect. We're back. And just for everyone, if something like that happens and you get kicked out, we'll all still be here at that original link. So just jump back in and you'll find us.
All right. So I'm going to talk about some bridging some data gaps that we've had at Ancestry with Tableau Prep. While I am the senior manager for product analytics now, that's a role that I took on in August. And prior to that, I've worked at Ancestry for almost 6 years with our emerging business family history verticals, which is all of the sites and business units that we have that aren't part of the Ancestry.com or Ancestry DNA product. So we have several different sites, newspapers.com, which houses over 800 million newspaper archive pages, imaged and searchable. Fold3.com, which is military records, findagrave.com, which is kind of a crowdsourcing project where users will take requests. If you have an ancestor that was buried in somewhere in Pennsylvania or somewhere across the world, and you're curious what their headstone is, but you know that they were buried in a certain cemetery, you can make a request and volunteers will go out to the cemetery and take a picture of their gravestone. And it has become this treasure trove of gravestone pictures and genealogical data that has been built by the genealogical community. So those are just some examples of some of the groups that I worked with. And so I'll start out kind of talking about findagrave.com. I supported this business, and we had a problem as I started. And sorry, I should have used a dark screen, so now I'm glowing. But so our marketing manager was manually combining Excel files from multiple partners weekly. So we have advertising ads available on Find a Grave. And so she had these Excel files coming from multiple partners. Each partner had their own format, and I'll kind of get into that a little bit, but it wasn't consistent of how many columns they had or which columns were which or what values were there. And so in order to analyze this data, we built some dashboards, but it required her to combine all of these into one file. And so that was the solution at the time, was manually going through, doing text to columns in Excel and then copying and pasting from there over to here. And sometimes you had 4 columns that you were pasting over here, and sometimes you had 7 columns that you were pasting, and it took over 4 hours a week. And she often wouldn't get it done until Thursday. from running through last Sunday. She'd finish on Thursday and then be able to look at the report and find some insights from the prior week. And then if there was anything that she wanted to change, she'd already lost almost an entire week of being able to make adjustments. And so another thing we noticed as I started looking into it is that it led to data errors. Like, she was a very, what's the word? She took care to make sure that things weren't breaking, but sometimes, like, when you're dealing with 10 files and you're text to columning all different things, you're going to have data errors. It's just going to happen. So she came to me and she said, we have a third party that we're looking into that will consolidate all of these files, and it'll be X thousands of dollars up front and X thousands of dollars a month. Is there anything we can do in-house? And my response at that time, Tableau had just come out with this thing they were calling Project Maestro. If you've been around Tableau for a while, you will recognize this as the beta name for what became Tableau Prep. And so I believe we were shortly after a Tableau conference, and I said, Tableau just came out with this thing, and I think it could probably do what you're looking to do. So we started down that path. Here's an example of what these files would look like. And as you can see, this site tag is helpful. It has a lot of good information here, but it's not helpful that it's all in the same column. And many of them had things like this. Some of them even had, like, instead of dashes, they had like the double arrow characters that, like, you can't even get from a keyboard. And that was like what they put in there. So some of them, like this 300 by 250, sometimes that was in the fourth field. Sometimes it was the first of 5 fields. Sometimes it was the last of 3 fields. It was never consistent for each of these partners. And so just to kind of go through, one of the things that Ervin brought up was being able to split. And these fields were something that was super easy to do with Prep, where I can just click on it and I can tell it that I want to custom split on the hyphen and give me all of them. And then it breaks those out. And then I can get to a finished product where I say, this is the site. So, I can rename here and call this site. I can delete these 2 columns because they don't matter to us. I can rename this one and call it size. And then I can call this one position. And then to keep it clean, I can remove this one. And then I can reorder and get things into a nice place. And then I'm ready to go. I'm ready for the next piece. This is what the end results of that was. This is 130 nodes of awesomeness, I feel like. You'll notice that a lot of this, all of these pieces here are all just those partners. And some of these are pieces that we don't update anymore, that are just historical data, as she's dropped some partners and added new partners. But one thing Ervin brought up, you can only union 10 things together. And that was really kind of annoying as I was going through this project, because I was like, but wait, I have 40 things I need to union together. Thankfully, you can union those 10 things together and then union those 5 things all together, and it works just fine. So yeah, I'm not going to go through this whole entire piece, but you can notice, I'll just kind of dig in this way. You can notice that some of these have more things going on than others. And that just was dependent upon the file that we received from these partners. And then what Tableau Prep also allowed us to do was to combine our internal newspapers fold3 archives.com acquisitions that we were getting from advertising that we were doing on Find a Grave, and be able to also show those internal impressions and referrals together with all of these other pieces so that we could compare them together. And so this is something we've now been doing for probably 3-4 years. I don't even remember when Prep came out. It's been that long. But what it allowed us to do is basically for each of these partners, we have a file. So you saw each of those, each of these data sources is a file that we have on a shared drive. And so she can get the weekly data or from whenever it was last updated, copy it, paste it into the bottom of that file, just append it onto that file, save it, and then we can run the flow. When I mentioned that we add partners, she just goes in, adds the new file, sets the steps, and away we go. What used to take more than 4 hours a week and would take until Thursday now takes her less than 30 minutes. She can come in Monday morning, run it, boom, she knows what happened last week and what changes she wants to make. If she wants to take a look on Wednesday, she can. It's quick, and it is still, there's still that manual process of getting the partner data in, and some of that is just, that's how it is. But we were able to also reduce those data errors because we're not trying to reprocess these things every week. We're letting Tableau Prep do it automatically. And then there wasn't really an additional cost. It was already part of our existing license. And this project really gave me a crash course in using Tableau Prep. And I made mention of literally with the beta, like it crashed on me so often, and I would like try and do stuff, and it was like, but it was still worth it because we were solving a problem that needed to be solved and was going to make our life easier. So that was kind of how we got started with Tableau Prep at Ancestry. And then as we progressed, I mentioned that I worked with all of these other business units, and compared to our main Ancestry.com work, they're a bit smaller. And so a lot of times the work that we had that would go into getting some of this stuff into a data warehouse and ETL processing wasn't something that would ever get prioritized over some of those core business data warehouse needs. And so a lot of times I would have the leaders of these business units ask questions, and I would say, well, the data is there, but it's not in a way that I can answer what you're wanting to answer. Sometimes it involved doing things from one database and combining it with data that we had in our data warehouse. And that makes, using SQL difficult. It's not on the same server. You can't, easily cross database stuff. So cross database joins, when those came out in Tableau, was a godsend for me. And then that only expanded within Tableau Prep. Something that Prep has allowed me to do, and you know, Ervin really showed this through a lot of the demo that he did, is, you know, even if I was doing something in SQL, you write this big long SQL statement, you run something and you're like, oh, I think that's right, but I don't really know, like when there's a massive amount of data, you don't really know what, you know, should I expect this many rows? I'm not sure sometimes. And Prep allowed me to follow the data through that process and see, okay, I'm joining here. That's one of my favorite things about Tableau Prep is the visualization of joins. That you can see, if I'm doing a left join, these are the things that I'm going to include. If I'm doing an inner join, these are the things that I'm excluding. That a lot of times we don't get that visual aspect when we're building a SQL query. We'll just think, oh, I just need to join, and you're not really thinking about it. And then down the road, you're like, oh, I've excluded all of this data that I should have done a left join. It also allowed me to augment business unit data from our warehouse when business processes changed, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And for me, oftentimes, like I'll have colleagues that reach out and say, hey, I'm trying to make this query work. Something's not working right, or it's running too long and it's timing out and it shouldn't give me that many records, or it's not giving me enough records. And rather than just trying to go into, you know, looking at that query and trying to make sense of it, I just start building the query in Tableau Prep. And somewhere along the way, I might find that a join is doing something that we didn't anticipate, or that we're trying to find some value in a field and it's not actually there. And we can see that very clearly in Prep. One bonus, you could call it, I often when I'm doing this process and I'm building things in Prep that I haven't necessarily looked at before, because it's so visual, I will see things that I'm like, wait, that shouldn't be happening in this cluster of data that I'm looking at. And so then I'll dig into that, and we'll often find just, you know, data quality defects that we have. You know, we have a lot of data, and most of the time, you know, they're minor, they're a small population, but they're material nonetheless. And so it allows me to find those, and then, you know, that continuously improves our data quality as we go forward. So I mentioned you know, having people reach out about queries. I'm one of the Tableau server admins in our organization, and we had a group that was trying to run a query, and it was timing out. Our Tableau server queries time out after 2 hours, and they had gone back to the drawing board. They'd met with our DBAs, and they came back and they said, we optimized this query as much as possible. Like, how much more can we do? But it's still timing out after 2 hours. And I looked, and they were doing a lot of aggregation and partitioning and all sorts of stuff in the query itself. And so I started, like I said, building it out in Tableau. And this is what it came down to. And they were doing all of this in one massive query. And, you know, in some cases, like this was a user table. And so they were joining this initial table to a user table 6 times to get different roles, different names of people in different roles, like a manager and a director and a product manager and so on. And so they were joining to this same table 6 times and pulling from this massive user table 6 times within the query. And so I played with it. I built it out in Prep. I walked through and was like, okay, I think this is what the query is doing. And then I messaged our server admin and I said, look, this has been timing out after 2 hours. I'm about to do it. It was like the first one that I had run from Tableau server. It was right after we had gotten that capability. And so I messaged him and I said, I have no idea what this is going to do this to the server. Like, I don't know if it's going to crash things, if it's going to like break Redshift while I'm doing it or something. So just in case, this is what I'm doing. And 3 minutes later, the flow was done. So we took a query that was taking 2 hours and not completing. And from the same server, from the same Tableau server, we were running that and getting to the same end result in 3 minutes. And I think part of that came down to, instead of trying to do all of the processing on the database in the query, I just said, hey, I want everything from this field or from this table. And I want everything from this table. And I want everything from this table. And there's some filtering that could be done at that level. Like you'll notice these filter icons here. Like some of those things were filtered to date timeframes or what have you. But it really was simplifying the interaction with our Redshift database and saying, just give me the data from these tables, and then I'll do all of this other stuff, which Tableau Prep is built to do. And so this is something that we continue to use. Please ignore all the red triangles. I just didn't log into the database before on Prep, before I took my screenshot. They're not normally broken like that. And so that was something that was very powerful for me in my mind of, we have these big things that we do in SQL, but it really can be simplified on the data warehouse side if we pull them into Prep and let Prep do what it's been built for. And it's a lot easier to follow what's going on than trying to parse all of the different pieces out of a SQL query. Another thing I mentioned is a reporting change. We have one of our businesses sells subscriptions on its own site, and then it also bundles together with Ancestry subscriptions. And so we needed for the newspapers business to be able to say, these are the subscriptions and how much money they sell for and bring in from here, but we also need to know the subscriptions and the money that they bring in on the Ancestry side from that bundled package. And that was the change from what we had before. And so those are in two completely different places and two completely different processes and two completely different commerce engines and two completely different data silos and structures. And my boss needed information to be able to make financial forecasts and financial budgets. And so I started in on how do we figure this out? And I have no doubt that I would not have arrived at any solution without what I was able to do with Tableau Prep. So it really breaks down into two pieces. This was pulling the commerce information from our bundled subscriptions. You'll notice, joining to some div tables, doing an aggregate, joining to another table, joining back to the other table, just because of the way that we were storing subscription info, order information and subscription information. And then joining again to another dim table and then doing an aggregation to say, here's all of these, all of the sales data from this side of things. And then taking that, joining it with the subscription information that we have that passes from Ancestry to newspapers, and then actually unioning that then with the newspaper subscriptions and the newspaper's commerce information itself. And then doing that for our fold 3 as well. They kind of work together. And so I unfortunately, like, I couldn't just walk through these, but just to kind of show, like, these are things that we would have struggled to make happen and struggled to get answers to, partially because of the prioritization of that work. And part of it just is understanding the data. And that's kind of where we want to go, as with our organization. A lot of times, analysts will be trying to make an analysis and then come across, oh, I need the data to be, reshaped or combined or what have you. And so then they would put it in a request to the data warehouse team, and the data warehouse team was completely slammed with big projects and little projects and medium projects and everything. And so, as tends to happen, people started making their solution to get to what they needed. And so they were building those queries, and we have Elation at Ancestry, and so they were scheduling those to run in Elation. And even when we do get data warehouse resources, and I'm assuming this happens, at various other places, it can be hard to line up. These are all the requirements that I have, and then the engineer will go through and they'll be like, well, but what about this, and what about this, and what about this data type, and what about this data type, and sometimes, like, I didn't know about those situations, and so it was a learning experience for me. But we have to go back and forth, and there's a lot of back and forth in that, in QAing, testing those anomalies that you don't foresee. Those analyst queries, a lot of them published to a schema that we have in Redshift that's an analyst schema, but it's not backed up. And so we don't have the lineage for those queries because it's not something that we show the building from the source table into that schema and then into the Tableau data source. So one thing that Prep allows us to do, and kind of alluded to this earlier, is a lot of times as analysts, the data that you're looking for, the data that you're working on, and you should know the business rules that you're dealing with. The why of the question that you're trying to answer. And so a lot of times you're the right person to be able to say, this is what I need to do to the data to get to this format to be able to then source it. When you have the ability to run Tableau Prep, we've added data management recently, so we have Prep Conductor available. Then the analyst can build the flow, they can run it, they can test it, they can compare to what they would expect to see. We can run those flows and start getting that reporting out to our stakeholders and be able to get the feedback around, is this right? Is this the right format? Do we have the data in the way that we need to be able to visualize it as we desire? And then by doing that, we're pulling from the source tables, and so then lineage through Elation into the end dashboards is consistent, and we can follow it through the end in Elation, and then through Tableau Catalog all the way to the end. And then one thing is, as we talked about bringing on data management and being able to have this self-service option for analysts to be able to kind of work through the queues, If we have a flow that we want to operationalize and we want to get in the data warehouse, then the data warehouse team has a roadmap. We don't have to like rebuild the requirements for this project. We just have to hand them the flow, and then they make that happen on the data warehouse side, and it has all of the pieces that it needs, and it works through that process faster for them as well. A bonus of that is we take a lot of the little stuff off of their plate, because if we can do it in prep and it doesn't really need to be operationalized, you know, into the data warehouse, and it just gets us to a published data source on Tableau server, then we don't have to worry about that, and we can just do it when we have the need and get it done. Yeah, so that's where we're at, kind of our journey through Tableau Prep. I'm glad that Ervin did a lot of demoing, because I didn't have too much of that, but hopefully that kind of helps provide the business context of what prep can do for you all. Happy to answer questions. I think we have some time.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kyle. That was really, really insightful. I just, to be frank, had never imagined the data issues that a company like Ancestry would face in terms of the sheer number and diversity and quality of the data sources that you're bringing in. So I feel like I learned a lot about that as well. I love how you revisited that business problem. I think finishing a weekly task by Thursday is a classic situation of there's just got to be a better way of doing it. I love that you got the process from 4 days to 30 minutes. I think everyone must have been so impressed by that change. So I thought that was really, really cool. So there are a couple of great call outs from me for prep in that conversation. So big ones that really ring true for me: joins. For me, the ability to check what the clean is doing is really amazing, particularly when you're developing multi-clause joins. So by that, I mean when you've got lots of different things that are defining how data should be brought together. I also really loved that you talked about the different roles of prep. So it can just be a great way for your users to get to know the data and figure out where all the gremlins are, and test an approach that you can then use at scale, and do what the backend guys might not have time for because it's not high up enough on their radar, or even optimize the approach that's being taken at scale. Joining 6 times is not wise. So I thought that was a really great call out. Now, we do have time for questions. So if people do have additional questions, now is your golden opportunity. Pop them into the chat. I think there's a long one that's just popped in there, so I'm going to take a second to read that. I think a few other people might as well. But this is really your opportunity to ask those questions. So I'm going to pause for kind of a minute or two of awkward silence and see if any more can be flushed out. So we'll see how we go.
I'm just trying to catch up with the chat at this point.
Yes, there's a bit there. I saw a lot of conversation going, so thank you. Wow, okay, so I see that question there from Michael, so thank you, Michael. This is a question about 2 different databases. So oftentimes you find that the key fields don't match up. So we don't have a consistent primary key across 2 different databases. And how do you have that conversation with the different data warehouse teams to help them understand the need for that match? I've got my own opinion in here, but Kyle, Ervin, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that one.
How do you have a conversation? So yeah, it's a hard one, and in some cases, like we've had to make certain assumptions around that. So for example, when we're working between different sites, we make an assumption that someone used the same email on both sites. There's obviously people who don't, and there's probably some fat fingering that goes on and whatever else. And so that part just becomes, you have to recognize it and vocalize it, but then there's not really anything you can do about which email users are choosing. And so you move on. You know, when you're talking different departments, hopefully it's not from deleting records, but if it is, then I think it's just, hey, if we want to be able to answer this question, we need these fields to be aware. And I think part of it just is identifying what the value is of having them the same, and then being able to get the right stakeholders on board to say, yes, this is a priority. And sometimes it's just awareness. Like I mentioned the business units that I worked with. So many people in the data organization forget that these even exist, even though like they contribute a good chunk of our EBITDA annually. Like nobody knows that they're there. And so they'll do things, and then we'll be like, hey, our newspaper subscriptions started dropping off, and oh, well, we did this test and this happened and it worked great. And we said, well, that lines up right directly with when we saw things dropping over here. And so just some of it becomes getting people to think about it and to be aware of it, and raising that awareness overall.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic call out. Certainly what I see with lots of businesses is that you can end up with not a very great link between your end users and the business outcome of the data and the developers. And the closer you can get those conversations, the better. The more discussions you can have around how the data is used and how the data drives impacts to your business, the better. The more likely your developers will see their job in making that data and in doing things like defining those primary keys as needing to make your job as the analyst easier, because it's driving those business outcomes. And it can also just be a case of showing the developers what you're doing to get around their mismatches. So for me, it can be a case of saying, look at my prep flow. Look how terrible this is that you don't have two consistent keys. It's taking me 19 steps to try and stitch this data together, and it's still an imperfect match. Look at the manual process we've made. Can we please have a consistent key between these tables? And sometimes when you just show people why you care and what the impact of that is, that can really help them come on board to giving you a hand. Awesome. Are there any additional questions or comments from Ervin or Kyle, just to close? No, not sounding like it. Awesome. Well, I learned a lot today. Thank you. I had a lot of fun, and it was my privilege to be here to host this session. A massive thank you to Ervin and Kyle, our presenters. They did an amazing job, and I learned a ton, so I hope everybody else did as well. Big thank you. Now, thank you again to those people who asked questions. There were some people who asked some curly ones. So if I didn't get you an answer today, I will pop answers into the Tableau Prep playground in Slack. So that's a good kick to join that if you're not already there. So please join that and keep an eye out for those answers. I will be off for Christmas, which I hope a lot of you people will be as well. So my answers might come after then, but I promise to come back to you. Thank you again. I'm getting asked another question for a link to Slack. I will pop that one in. I think it's the very, very beginning of our chat, but I will pop it in again so it's nice and fresh. Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. So thank you very much to everybody for joining us. Have a fantastic Christmas and New Year, and we'll see you all on the other side at the next one of these